I'll call this meeting to order, and first item of business is RCMP Appreciation Day. In 1873, the Parliament of Canada established the Northwest Mounted Police. On February the 1st, 1920, the Northwest Mounted Police and the Dominion Police of Eastern Canada were merged to the new entity called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Recognizing the 100th anniversary of this merger, the province of British Columbia has issued a proclamation declaring February the 1st, 2020 as Royal Canadian Mounted Police Appreciation Day. So I have at least 4 members of my immediate family that have been involved in the RCMP. They've had a rough time over the last few years in terms of establishing the credibility of the force. I have a great respect for them still. I think they have challenges, but I certainly want to recognize them on this anniversary and appreciate the work they do for our communities. Any comments from council would be appreciated. Councillor Thompson.
I absolutely agree with what you've said. I have several friends who went into the force, and the service that they provide to all of our Canadian citizens and visitors is exemplary.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. All right, the first item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
And a seconder, Councillor Zielinski. This is the regular meeting agenda. All those in favor? Carried. And arising from the minutes, we have a...
We haven't done the minutes yet.
No, we have special to go in camera minutes. Let's get rid of those. Can I have a motion to adopt those? January the 12th, 13th, and 20th, 3 different meetings. That motion to adopt those minutes, Councillor Moslin, and seconded Councillor Studley. All those in favor? And the regular minutes of January the 13th, regular meeting, a motion to adopt. Councillor Zielinski.
Point of order, Your Worship. The regular meeting minutes that were circulated with our package, there was some changes to that, just with us stopping the meeting and restarting it. There was some people coming in and out that would just have to be clarified. So we've been given a clean copy of our regular minutes, and hopefully we can use those to pass tonight.
Can you make the motion and that we accept this revised copy?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
And seconded by Councillor Studley. Any comments on these? This is basically correcting what was a pretty confusing situation, getting the process clearer.
Perhaps,
Councillor Thompson?
just for the public and the gallery, we could review the amendments to these minutes.
Please.
Yes, I will. So the call to order, the minutes that we got in our package, the call to order on the new package is cleaned up, as far as just not mentioning that we were going to reconvene on the 15th. It was just start of the meeting. And then most of the changes were more under the late item. Where the way the original one read, it almost looked like we had our representatives from BFS at the 13th meeting. When they weren't at the 13th, they were actually at the 15th meeting. So it's just to clarify some of the wording about where we go when we reconvene, and it's those back couple pages that were just cleaned up, that's all.
Comment on that? Okay, the motion to accept those revised minutes, all those in favor? Carried.
Business
And-
arising.
Pardon?
Business arising.
Business arising, yes.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to, I guess, pass a different resolution just to clear up our resolutions, I thought it was 11 C, D, and E, where the resolution that we just passed in the minutes says that those utility bylaws will be coming back to this meeting for consideration. And as you notice from the agenda, they're not here. So I would just like to pass a new motion changing 11 C, D, and E to read something like bylaws such and such have been deferred to staff for more comment, and we'll return at a future date, something like that.
Without defining a specific date?
Yeah, that's my
To
intent,
say
sir.
that they're not. It's an acceptable change. Can I have a seconder on that? Councillor Thompson? Further discussion? The correction of that movement forward of those items, utility bylaws? Councillor Moslin?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, where is that correction going to be made? It's going to be made on the minutes of this meeting.
It's a new motion.
Yeah.
So it would be, okay, so it would be under business arising on our current agenda.
Captured by a separate motion.
Yeah, so motion 11 C, D, and E amended to read such and such for employee input as opposed to that date.
And that'd be placed in unfinished business, item 5. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out where it goes.
Okay.
Does it go under minutes, item 3, minutes? Is that where this motion would end up in the minutes of this meeting?
Oh, I think Daniel.
Daniel?
Somebody wanna-
May I, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. It wasn't a motion in the minutes per se in the last meeting, it was simply comments written underneath it, so it would be fair maybe for council to simply say something from business arising from the minutes that speaks to these 3 items, 11 C, D, and E were originally referred to this meeting, but instead for staff to keep on considering. You don't have to make it a motion.
You just make it a correction.
What
You
I'm
don't
saying,
have
yeah, and it doesn't even have to be corrected in the minutes. It can just be something that's in this current meeting today, business arising from the minutes from last time. You would suggest, or your council would like these to be brought back at a later time once all the staff input is complete.
Let's just get
And that's the resolution.
You don't have to have a resolution, you just want to add it in that section as a
Saying those dates
comment.
weren't a resolution to begin with, so we don't have to change
Oh.
it. They were just comment.
Yeah, I have it on the screen right now. Like there's one right here. This is just a comment. This is not a resolution.
Okay.
Okay, you get the adjustments.
Yeah.
It's acceptable? Okay. Moving on. All right, we're moving down to councillor reports, and we'll go around the table. Councillor Moslin, do you have any reports to make?
Yes, your worship, I do have a report, which I won't read to the meeting, but I just want to highlight a couple things. You know, the Discover Grand Forks Committee is going ahead, and it is being well, the trail groups are definitely well represented within that group. And there, in my report, you'll see that there are some suggestions from the Trail Subcommittee to the larger Discover Grand Forks Committee, and I'm expecting some of those to eventually find their way to council in a committee of the whole meeting, I believe that's scheduled for March. And one other item besides the Trails recommendations was the discussion about the installation of a Portland loo. This is basically an all-weather outside loo, so it's not a heated building, and it's basically an outhouse, which I don't know the technicalities really clearly. It uses water to a minimum, and therefore it doesn't encourage loitering, doesn't provide a warm spot inside, but it does provide our citizens and visitors with some valuable relief, as recommended by Roger Brooks. The Grand Forks Social Service Advisory Group is going to meet this Wednesday. You know, it was a really eventful week, as you all know. The previous council meeting was extended so that meetings could be held between the meeting, and that seems to have worked out at this point. Council did provide a letter of comfort to both BC Housing as well as Boundary Family Support Services, and the shelter is open. It's what's ahead of this group that I do want to bring out my report. The point in time count, this is a very technical count over a 24-hour period. It will probably involve several agencies that are sitting at the Social Service Advisory Group meeting. It will probably be held sometime in March, but nothing much more is going to be provided. I'm hoping that the meeting this week on Wednesday will start to flesh out the details of this count. Later on in this meeting, you'll see an AKBLG resolution, basically on emergency services, that together with the mayor and staff, we've composed to bring forward to the AKBLG. And just a tip of my hat to both council for their patience in the CAO interviews, for our interim CAO, Ron Matusi, for his leadership, much appreciated experience and leadership. And a big thank you to the 4 candidates we did interview. All of them were excellent community leaders. All of them had a great deal to offer. And I enjoyed interviewing each one, and I learned something from each one, which I think was probably part of Mr. Matusi's intent. Anyhow, sometime in the next future, council will announce the successful applicant. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councilor Zelinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I want to bring forward is it's more of a question to staff. Back, I believe, in December, we were presented with some definitions on social housing issues, and we, I think the motion was that we were going to go out to the public for input, and I'm looking for a date for that input.
We haven't said anything yet. We're working on budgets at the moment and the DMAF, and hiring 2 staff members in my department. I'm losing one next week, so we will be working on that very quick as we can.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and just a follow-up. So we were at this exact same location in process last year at this time, and we have not moved forward. So we do have to move forward. I think there was a commitment, and correct me if I'm wrong, that before the March 31st deadline, we'd have definitions we'd agree on, and we'd also have a amendment to our bylaws where there's actually a penalty clause for not following bylaws. So my mind has a March 31st deadline on those 2 things. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
So they're not going to be dealt with?
Well, I'm assuming what I'm hearing at this point is that other priorities are taking the lead and that these matters will be addressed as quickly as we can in terms of workload.
I can't directly speak to the timeline exactly, but when I was at the Social Services Action Group meeting, I believe they had a timeline in terms of doing the pit count and going through other processes, and they were hoping that by the end of March, early April, they would be able to have some ideas there. Maybe we can utilize this whole process that they're going through to piggyback our process onto it if they're doing any sort of public engagement sessions. So I'm not saying anything about March 31st, but like there's another social services group that's already doing a lot of that work. Maybe we can simply harness that potential that they currently got going for them to get our items in there as well.
And I understand the urgency that Councillor is addressing here in his concerns.
Okay.
At this point, I also recognize the kind of immediate problems that staff are facing in addressing some of the issues that are on their plate. You're comfortable with that?
No, but
Councillor Moslin?
Yes, Your Worship, I do share Councillor Zelinski's sense here. You know, one of the things we are to do with our housing cap is to perform the zoning function. And, you know, maybe Councillor Zelinski and I might be coming at this challenge from opposite perspectives. But I think we both correctly see that this is an obstacle that we can overcome. I'd like the corporate officer's suggestion about tossing it to the Social Services Advisory Group, but then they'll set the date. I mean, you toss it to them, they might, you never know, they might actually pick up the ball and run with it. I can certainly see that part of the point in time count, part of the whole thing about the point in time count, is that it engages the community in an understanding of the problem, that it involves the community, maybe even people who aren't necessarily frontliners, in the count. And perhaps somewhere in there, an evening meeting outlining the purpose of the count, the means of the count, as well as the other issues around zoning, might be an appropriate event to invite staff to participate in. Anyhow, thanks for the idea.
Councillor Thompson? And Councillor Moslin, you won't be at that next meeting, but Councillor Thompson will be. That's Wednesday.
Yeah, that's this Wednesday. Just a couple of things before I get into reporting. With respect to Councillor Zelinski's concerns on definitions and zoning, I think we heard this week in some of our workshops, or maybe not even this week, maybe it was last, I don't know, we've had a lot of, we spent a lot of time together, is that really the official community plan is the driving force of the zoning bylaw. And we need to do that before we do the rewrite of the zoning bylaw. Having said that, the definitions, and I'm going to defer to our interim CAO on this, the definitions have to apply to specific zones. You can't just have a definition and just toss it in there. So that's going to take some time to put together, and I appreciate the urgency. I mean, I'm not discounting that, but we put so much on our management staff right now, and as Dolores has said, she's losing 2 people, that I would prefer not to give a deadline for staff. They know it's a priority for our council, and I do believe that they will be coming back with what we require at the earliest convenience. I don't think that's anything that's going off the side of anybody's desk. But having said that, I didn't have a chance to get my written report in. So we've had several budget meetings, pre-budget meetings. Some we had to defer to another day because other meetings and workshops went on and on and on. And so, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We've had some really good discussions, and as late as this afternoon. I also want to acknowledge our interim CEO in our help to find a permanent CAO. He gave us 4 excellent candidates to interview. They are all very qualified. It's not going to be an easy decision to make, but as soon as we do, we will certainly be happy to advise public management first and staff, and then the public of who the successful candidate was.
So, and Mr. Matuzzi has been waiting to respond to you, asking him to respond.
Oh, okay.
Ron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, Your Worship, Councillor Thompson, you are correct in that before you actually change the bylaw, you have to apply those zones somewhere. But we have submitted a report. The definitions are kind of boilerplate. I mean, this was not magic. It's not Shakespeare. Even he apparently didn't write his own stuff. But, so certainly that information, if we want to at least not, the problem is arranging for a public meeting and the space at the curling rink and all those types of things. The information's out there, and certainly we could, post the information, post the report, have public input, to set a deadline for public input, that at least we know that side of it. The real pertinent question ultimately is which of those types of facilities you want where. It's more the siting criteria in the end that'll be the real important. I don't think people will argue too much over the definition. So we can accelerate that part, because I don't think it'll have necessarily a real impact as trying to come up with a meeting date in January after Christmas with budget and everything else. So, we could certainly accelerate that. I can come back to council with a way to try to get that public input back. And we could deal with those definitions, at least narrowing them down. You may not apply them just yet, but you might have some consensus on what you want to see in the zoning bylaw. So on one hand, over time, we could move some of this stuff forward without necessarily zoning land at this point in time, if that works for council.
Councillor Zelinski.
Thank you very much. Yes, I appreciate that sort of timeline and whatnot, and I guess I just want to point out that whatever pin count or whatever process the social services group is going to do, it's different than our process, and all the reasons why we're not dealing with it now, we heard the same ones last year at this time. So as long as we're not, it's not a repeat of last year, I guess, in the timeline or the suggestions. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, and is the floor yours for report, or is that it for?
Well, that's it.
Councillor Thompson.
I did mine.
That was it.
That was it.
Councillor Studley.
Yeah, just wanted to point out the workshops have been great. I enjoyed the process for the search for the new CAO and look forward to announcing the successful candidate.
All right, council, can I have a motion to accept council reports? Councillor Moslin, Councillor Zelinski, all those in favor. The regional district, a couple of quick items. Still working on budgets, big time, trying to keep that cost down, and there are some factors that are difficult. We had the open house for the community center at the arena, at the pool rather, the other night. A good turnout. It just, filled the room. There was a lot of support for option A, I believe, which was the preferred. And again, a desire for more meetings with the general public leading up to how we describe the facility in more detail to the people who are interested in that detail. So I'm encouraged to think that we're going to have more meetings where they can get more in-depth information about all the work that's gone in. There's been at least, I think, 300 people involved. I mean, the work that Community Futures has done has really brought a lot of consultation to this design, and I know that they're on our agenda coming up here fairly quickly. I think the next regular meeting, or is it a committee of the whole?
Committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole. So we'll also be appraised of some more of the detail of that plan, but it's an exciting plan. The other discussions at the economic development table regional had to do with an item on the agenda that's coming up, so I'll leave that. That's the poverty reduction strategy, and that's about it at this point from the regional district. Any questions on the RD? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I was at the open house for the community center, and the biggest concern that I was receiving from people were parking, in particular for seniors. So can you communicate that to the regional district and maybe ask them to speak to that when they are here at our committee of the whole?
Laura Loda did a great job of speaking on behalf of seniors that need parking.
Yeah.
So, but I will remind
But
them.
it wasn't just her that I.
No, it wasn't, for sure. Daniel?
Thank you, Your Worship. The building committee met on Friday morning again, so we went through a lot of the feedback that we received, and that's definitely one of the items that's top priority on the regional district list to look at solutions. Potentially in the back towards James Donald, Dick Bartlett Park, yeah, or figuring out some other configuration around the rear end of the building. Anything really, but they're looking at options.
And the regional district meeting this week is in Grand Forks. They've changed their times now from a 6 o'clock meeting to a 1 o'clock meeting. And it's Thursday, I believe, this week that it's coming up. So that's open to the general public, and you can experience the action at the big table. Sorry, it's not committee of the whole, Gloria, but maybe later. All right, can I have a motion to accept the regional district report? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Studley, all those in favor. First item under recommendations is the early budget approval for the official community plan and the real estate strategy. You've all read your reports. Can we open with any comments from staff on this one? We just want to open it for discussion. We've really talked about it quite a bit in the last couple of days. I mean, my only comment here is that we need to recognize how much this is integrated with DMAF, and how if we are not prepared to move these directions, that we stand a chance of slowing down the process that we promised not to get in the way of. And so I think this is a really important decision on our part to consider. Opening it up for discussion. Councillor Zelinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you said, we've discussed this informally quite a bit, so my comments to staff and council will probably be a reiteration of before. Probably, I guess, two things concern me about the real estate strategy. Is the time frame, and I was trying to find it, but I thought it said 5 to 6 months. And then adding that in with the comment that it will also help with the in-kind. So what I want to make sure is that 5 or 6 months for a strategy, council approval, we lose another summer of construction. And we have to try and, whether it's lots, whether it's surfacing or whatever, I would hate to see another year go by that we really don't get something in the ground. So that's my concern. And again,
Stop on that one. The urgency of that is what you're expressing, and we have Graham here, I think, is ready to comment on it.
Thank you, Your Worship. The councillor, thank you. We're working on a work plan for the in-kind and reinvestment program, and expect to bring that in early February or the February meeting. So, there's some analysis that needs to go into that scope to get there, but urgency is definitely noted by the entire team, and they're working on it.
Councillor Moslin? I'm sorry.
no, just one other comment again that I mentioned is the comments saying that we're going to sort of defer our capital reinvestment, the $2 million. And again, it just puts us further behind in fixing up our old pipes.
Pushing forward, good. Councillor Moslin?
Yes, Your Worship. This was a tough one for me. I am going to speak in favor of this proposal, but boy, let me tell you, I feel like my arm's back there somewhere. Anyhow, we needed a real estate strategy before May 2018, because we were drastically short houses then. Now, with the DMAP proposal to basically take 80 homes to the landfill, or try to avoid taking 80 homes to the landfill, doubles down on the need for a real estate program. I'm a little apprehensive because I think the real estate program, this is basically not a real estate program. It's an investigation to find a strategy that will work.
Right, it's a bit of a misnomer, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, I'm a little apprehensive that we might not find a strategy that works. And that there will be we'll find that there are indeed too many risks to the city. They might find that. I mean, that's why we're doing it. I guess in the report it talks about the fundamental question that the city will be confronted with is after acquiring 0 million in real estate assets, what comes next? Well, I'm puzzled over that because, of course, the city is not going to is going to spend perhaps that much to acquire real estate, but it isn't really real estate they're going to acquire. They're going to be acquiring, they're going to be acquiring floodplain. So you don't have $12 million in real estate. You don't even really have $12 million in assets. What you really have is probably somewhere between, in some time, over a period of time, hopefully, 50 to 60 homes that will be capable of being moved to another location that will cost somewhere between $30,000 to $40,000 to develop our own land. That was an estimate council heard from Keystone, no less. And then you've got to pay for the footing, that is the foundation, the retrofitting, and the connecting of services and all the other costs. So it's not really $12 million in assets. It's really you're going to purchase a home that you really got to do something with if you're ever going to get any money out of it or not. Okay, yeah, so we really do need a real estate strategy. All right, I'm hoping that we get a positive report from this effort, that we are indeed, the city is not indeed taking on too much risk, because we are, in the final analysis, making people, we're not helping the case for homelessness in our community, something that council knows all too well, and is in the staff report, that by carrying this forward, we are taking a segment of home ownership, the low end. We're buying them out, but we're not necessarily giving them the means to buy back in, which is a hard thing to carry around. And I like Councillor Zielinski's concern too, is, this goes on. And right now we're looking at the 2020 freshet. Yikes. And I'm assuming that probably there's going to be 2 or 3 more freshets before this acquisition and moving program has been carried out. So there is indeed risk, lots of risk. Anyhow, I'll pause there, Your Worship, to hear.
But you're speaking in favor of the motion, in the sense that it may answer some of the questions you've just been asking.
Yes, it may gauge the risk, and my warning is, there may be a lot of risk that it identifies.
This will help define that risk better for you.
I hope so, and for our citizens, Your Worship.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I support this resolution. I know that there are concerns that this has been on somebody's side of their desk, but in consideration of all the events that has happened in our city and the priorities that our staff have felt that they needed to deal with, I am pleased to see that this is moving forward. I find it easier looking through the front window of my car than the rear view mirror. And this is going to be what we need to move forward. It's going to tell us what we need in the way of housing, where the best locations are, what's available, what isn't available, what the market bears. There's a whole number of variables that are going to be included in that report. and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I see that it's also going to be referencing our official community plan, which is positive. So, I mean, it's all coming together. It takes time. As I used to tell my son, fastest isn't best. And, you know, patience is a virtue, and sometimes that's very, very difficult to, I find myself biting my finger on a semi-regular basis at times, but we are going forward. So I really thank our staff for doing this, taking this on, and I have every confidence that this is the year it's going to be finalized.
So can we get the motion on the floor, Councillor Thompson? Will
Yes,
you make the
I will.
motion? And seconded by Councillor Stubney. Just to clarify the motion a bit, this is tagging the two together in one resolution, but in fact we're hoping that there may be some cost savings in combining the real estate strategy and the official community plan redo. Councillor Zelinski.
Education on my part, what are employment lands? Can someone describe what employment lands are?
Through the mayor, generally it's lands that contribute to the economic productivity of the city, where it's directly for business. In some cases, communities can look at workforce housing and that kind of thing, but it's that which can help with economic development and diversification. So this ties it back together with the work that Community Features and the EDA are discussing.
The land inventory.
Exactly.
Yes. So it dovetails nicely with the economic development strategies. Further on this, Councillor Moslin?
Just some clarification about the financing. It says, and that the amount be included in the 2020 financial plan bylaw to be funded from the general operating budget.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay, my assumption was that it was going to be covered by a capital expenditure.
Do you want that argument now?
Okay, sure.
Did you want some comment on the financing, Councillor?
Well, yeah, my understanding was it was going to come out of basically the money that the city sets aside for its asset management program. Sets aside $2 to $3 million a year. I think I've got this right. And that the $250,000 was going to come out of that, so that it would not have a direct bearing on taxes. What it would mean is it would take out from reserves money that was scheduled to go into those reserves.
Right. And
Is that right? Is it fair to call that
caucusing here,
off?
I think we'll get a comment. in a
They're
moment.
calling a friend, your worship.
Comment?
Somebody.
We may be able to capitalize some of the expenditures because if they lead and tie directly into the capital project, but I believe Juliet has said in the past that if that does happen, she can move it from an operating into a capital as long as it links up with the capital project in the end. So I think we would need a bit of advice and maybe a chat with Juliet about that.
Could we, thank you, Your Worship, is it possible to maybe change or amend the resolution to say something like, with funding to be determined through the budgeting process? Because in that way, it gives us the opportunity to go a little bit from capital, a little bit from operating for that particular
Councillor
project.
Thompson made the motion. You'll accept that as an amendment?
I certainly will.
Is there any concern from the seconder? Okay, so we accept that as a change. Ready for the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you, Council. I think that's great. We're promising not to get in the way of progress, and you're urging us to get
on with it.
Get on with it. All right, the next item is the AKBLG Resolution. Councillor Moslin has crafted it along with Kevin's help, and so I'll let you two introduce it.
Yeah, briefly, Your Worship, and I'll turn it over to Kevin, is that council, we were casting about, realizing that for some reason in the previous decade, an extreme weather response plan became the obligation of a private society, which when that private society triggered it, it would trigger emergency funding from BC Housing. Well, that's all well and good if you still have the private society, and I guess council was perplexed. There's something so important as an extreme weather response plan. Why would we put it in the hands of volunteers? Why isn't it a function of government? And so with that in mind, we turn to Mr. McKinnon for some expert advice in order to be able to pass a recommendation that we thought would work through the AKBLG. I invite Mr. McKinnon to comment.
Ken?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the discussion that led up to our meeting where we crafted this, obviously this city council has been working on some extreme weather response over the course of the month, and in those discussions it became very clear that as part of our regional emergency response plan, we've got plenty in there that covers fire, covers flood, I believe covers earthquake, but extreme weather was not a part of that. And in our research, it's not really a part of any emergency response plan other than the standalone extreme weather response plans, which, as Councillor Moslin mentioned, are more tied directly to an agreement with BC Housing for funding of those extreme shelters. So through feedback from residents, we've heard that there is belief that the safety of the public is something that is of interest at a municipal level, but also of a regional level. We've already had a resolution at this table extending that to the regional district for assistance and response. And so taking it even a step further to trying to tie this into access to provincial resources as necessary. The draft resolution, which is on the screen there for consideration to the AKBLG, is that the province pass legislation to ensure that response to extreme weather conditions is enacted in regional emergency programs, and that provincial resources be made available during such conditions to ensure satisfactory response. And I think the key part of this resolution is tying that to the availability of provincial resources, because it should not be one of the factors that is downloaded specifically down to the regional or local level. That the province needs to have a stake in this as well.
So expanding the programs is going to cost some more money. Basically, you need more resources, you assume.
It likely will. It will probably, if you think about the way Emergency Management British Columbia is already funded and the things that they respond to, this would likely entail expanding the scope of their work, but not necessarily taking it to the degree where it's going to require significant additional funding. It will be maybe a reallocation of some of what they're already doing.
Yeah. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I would just like to point out that extreme weather doesn't just mean extreme cold weather. There's extreme heat, there's air quality,
Wind events?
There's any number of things. So this would encompass any and all extreme weather emergencies.
Councillor Zelinski?
Thank you. More of a clarification for whoever's listening is that all of our emergency response programs, we do partner with RDKB anyway, so this is just part of that package. So.
Yes, and Councillor Moslin, would you like to make the motion here that Council directs staff to prepare a letter to AKBLG?
Okay, is that not basically the text there? Yes, okay, Your Worship.
So we're not actually approving or making a motion on the wording of the, or do you want to do that as well? Is it necessary?
You know, I would like to, I feel comfortable with the wording that we've come up with here, Your Worship. I think it will actually echo with other municipalities and regional districts within the Association of Kootenai boundary.
So the wording of this is outlining the resolutions.
Yes.
Would that cover the resolution we've created here?
Yeah, I guess if you'd like that council direct staff to pass along, or to put forward the following AKBLG resolution to the AKBLG. But that'll do it.
Councillor Thompson?
When I've prepared resolutions in the past, I have prefaced them with that the AKBLG petition of provincial government to either amend or enact legislation, whatever, because it's going to go to the UBCM. And further, when the resolutions are sent to the AKBLG, and then if it's passed there and forwarded on, they will make recommendations for amendments to the resolution and the language to, I think, better, if this isn't perfect, to enhancements.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the recommended resolution on the screen is that council direct staff to prepare a letter to the AKBLG outlining the resolution that Grand Forks would like considered for presentation to the UBCM.
We have to pass a resolution. We have to, as a council, have to pass whatever resolution we're sending to the AKBLG. So whatever resolution is going there has to be enacted here.
So you're feeling that's not enough, that we should also tag on the actual resolution to
Absolutely.
tonight?
Yeah.
Can we do that in terms of one motion? And
I don't know if Daniel agrees with me, but
No, it's, we can do that. So
Yeah.
No problem.
so we just add the resolution to
Yeah.
the text?
That council direct staff to send the following resolution to.
Right.
Yeah, something like that.
well, no, that, okay.
That would do it.
Well, okay, just give me 1 minute here. Rather than that resolution
Yeah.
that you've got on there, that the resolution read that the City of Grand Forks recommends that the AKBLG supports UBCM petitioning the provincial government to include legislation to enact extreme weather emergency programs and further that the provincial government ensure that resources are available to fund these emergency programs.
Kevin?
I'm bored.
So, looking at the existing proposed resolution, I think what Councillor Thompson has suggested, that the City of Grand Forks recommends that the AKBLG supports UBCM petitioning the provincial government to, and then if you take the existing, take the first three words out of the existing resolution, but then paste the rest in there, So that would then read, UBCM petitioning the provincial government to enact legislation to ensure that response to extreme weather conditions is enacted in regional emergency programs and that the provincial resources be made available during such conditions to ensure satisfactory response. The one thing that clarifies from what you said, Councillor Thompson, would be you specifically mentioned funding, but provincial resources could include other things, and that keeps it kind of deliberately broad.
Now, do we need to, do we need to include a definition of extreme weather?
Too much detail.
That's detail.
Too much detail? Okay, I agree, but I just thought, okay.
Did we have someone making that motion yourself? So this is the crafted motion, you're looking for a seconder on?
Just as information for council, your worship, BC Housing has a definition for extreme weather in their definition, so the province uses the same kind of terminology.
Does it include?
Extreme cold. It said there's extreme weather and then there's extreme cold weather, so there's different definitions for that, so extreme weather encompasses more.
We're looking for a seconder for Councillor Thompson's motion, and then you want to comment?
I would second it. I'm thinking that we've got what's, we agree that the motion is that, what we see on the screen here. Yeah, because I do like the wording to ensure, so I'll second it as it stands there, Your Worship. If I get a chance, I'd like to speak to it again briefly.
Do that.
Yes, besides forwarding this on to AKBLG, and also from there to UBCM, and then to the province. The province, as you know, is also looking for input on the revision of its Emergency Management Act. And that is happening basically as we speak. And I think the deadline for that input, I believe, is at the end of January. So this motion might not hit that. I was wondering if there would be any. I've got lots that I'd like to say to them about the Emergency Management Act, but I was wondering if it would be appropriate to also send this directly in some form to the province as input to the revision of the Emergency Management Act.
Can't see that being anything but positive.
Well,
Or does it undermine the process, Councillor?
I hear what you're saying, and I share that, but I think by going the route of the AKBLG and then onto the UBCM, it would find its way into the Emergency Management Act revisions. I don't want to circumvent the process by going one step beyond. I don't know, perhaps staff have a comment on that, give us direction or their opinion on this.
Opinions? Grant.
Probably the best.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so I know there's a deadline actually coming up this week on submissions for responses to the discussion paper on updates to the Emergency Program Act, actually it's a complete overhaul. And the regional district and other partners have prepared quite a bit of information for the province regarding including recovery and mitigation and that kind of thing under the new act. This is a new topic and might not be addressed in the discussion paper, but if council feels that this is an important issue that could be addressed there, it would be an appropriate time to include a note about it and perhaps whet the appetite for further discussion about it at the province.
Okay, so that sounds like it's not a bad idea at all, and that even though they would get it in the normal process, that this might bring more attention to the issue.
And coming from us, they'd probably put the.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor. Let's approve that first, and then we can refer to who it's sent to. So all those in favor of the motion? Okay, and in terms of circulation of it, we're agreed then that we would like to see it go both directions, directly to the government under the request for input on emergency planning, and to the AKBLG process. That's agreed? Good.
Does staff feel that we need a motion for that?
I don't think so. That's general direction.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. The next item of business is the poverty reduction plan for the boundary area. I supported this at the regional district table. Donna Dean has taken the lead in this from planning. Basically you've got a pretty good outline from her in your reports about and again, Councillor Krog asked me to clarify this. He's not here this evening, but that the regional district is the lead, that Donna Dean is taking personal responsibility as representative of the regional district on promoting this and applying for the grant. So it bumps the numbers up to a point where it may be extremely beneficial for the whole region, and I would like to see it supported. Further comment?
Generally, when the regional district is asking for or applying for grant money for projects that are going to be of benefit to a specified area, in this case the boundary, they require support from the stakeholders in the designated area. So that would be the City of Grand Forks, the City of Greenwood, the Village of Midway, the directors from area C, D, and E, and then it goes back to the regional district and it moves forward. So I'm very much in favor of this.
And that whole table, the Boundary Economic Development Group approved it last week.
Yeah.
Councillor Zelinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my understanding is this is very similar to the housing needs report that we've asked the RDKB to do for our region, where a report will be created and then it's up to us whether we accept it or not, or how we deal with it.
Whether it's meaningful to us or not. But, okay. Councillor Moslin.
Just a couple points about this, Your Worship. First off, by applying for this at a regional level, the amount of the award goes from $25,000 to $150,000.
Yes.
So we significantly increase the amount of money we have a chance of being awarded. $5 million over 3 years. Not a lot of money when you're considering, the number of regional districts and stuff out there. Anyhow, so by going regionally, we do increase our chance of securing some of the award. If we got the award, and it would probably go to a contractor to do a poverty reduction strategy, I'm assuming that an integral part of that study would include public involvement.
I would hope, yes.
That there would be meetings about the poverty, and I have gone back and I've been reading, about the poverty in our town. It's been well documented over the years. It does exist, and it exists in the region. As you know, our region is one of the lower ones. So I certainly support it by going again with our teammates in the RDKB. We enlarge the prospect of getting something for our citizens, including a chance to be part of a study on poverty within our area with their own participation. I do have a couple questions though. The timeline for I don't know the details. I guess we won't know the details, do we? We're just giving general support here. Somebody else is going to write the actual grant. I'm assuming they're going to ask for the maximum. I don't know. And that the grant will be forthcoming sometime this spring for study this summer and fall.
Yeah, I'm assuming Donna and her team would be doing the grant application.
Okay.
Can I have this motion that we're recommending? Councillor Moslin, would you like to make the motion here?
Can I go with what's up there, Your Worship? How about if I go with that? The City of Grand Forks supports the regional district making an application to the Union of BC Municipalities in order to conduct a poverty reduction plan for the boundary area. And further, that council approves the regional district of Kootenai boundary to receive and manage the grant funding on behalf of the City of Grand Forks.
And the seconder for that, Councillor Thompson. Further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. All right, the next item is D, the development variance permit, and at this point, just to be really simple and clear, we're being asked to walk through the previous process. Is that our understanding of this matter? It's a massive piece of paper, but I'm seeing it for the second time in our package. So the motion that we're looking for here is that council direct staff to proceed with statutory requirements for public notice respecting this matter. Can I have that motion, Councillor Moslin?
Can I have a question first, or?
No. Yes. What?
Does statutory requirements mean another public hearing?
Yes.
It does? Okay,
Yes.
well, I direct your attention to Table 2 in the report of the proposed timeline, which talks about letters being sent, but doesn't schedule a public hearing, Your Worship.
Can I get clarification on this from planning?
Thank you, Worship. The statutory or the legislative requirements for this type of permit is notifications surrounding property owners and adjacent properties. The previous process that we followed was a process that we were following for cannabis licenses. And so we were combining a public feedback session with the other notification requirements. So this is the standard legislative process that we would follow with any
matter of this kind.
Yes, sorry, any matter of this kind.
Okay. So, Councillor Moslin.
Does that include a public meeting or hearing?
No, it does not. It's notification to surrounding property owners.
Okay.
Thank you.
And do we have a seconder on that motion? Councillor Moslin is making it.
You know what?
Did you?
I don't know if okay. I haven't, yes, Your Worship, I will make that motion. Let's get it on the
The
table.
seconder for that? Councillor Thompson. Further comment? All those in favor?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Studley?
Yes, I would actually like to see some either feedback session or some sort of opportunity for public feedback.
Okay.
Your Worship, just to clarify, public hearing is a distinct statutory requirement. In this case, it's advertised, and anyone who's deemed to be impacted by the decision can speak at the meeting. So it's like a public hearing, but because there is a difference between a statutory public hearing and those who wish to speak that could be impacted, it's like a public hearing light, if you will. So when we said, everybody nodded and said it was a public hearing, the public gets to speak. The difference is it's not a, quote, public hearing, as you find in a rezoning or an OCP amendment, right? Those are statutory public hearings.
Councillor Moslin?
Yeah, Your Worship, that's why I've been pursuing
Yeah,
this.
so you just were getting hung up on words here.
Well, Your Worship, I see that if I'm going with the interim CAO's thinking, if the regular council meeting then is going to become a forum for the public to make their views known on this topic, but that may take a little bit of patience on your part as chair of the meeting to allow the public to speak during the course of the meeting. You hear what I'm saying? During a regular meeting, Your Worship, the public doesn't speak till the end of the meeting.
When they behave, yeah.
If they behave. Anyhow,
Okay.
Your Worship, you see the quandary I'm
It
in.
sounds like there's a desire to have some level of public discussion on this, if not a formal hearing, an opportunity to have it on the agenda at a point where there can be input from the gallery and the
Yes,
public.
is that possible, Your Worship? Through
And we're asking that, and they're talking about it, so. Yes.
Unless council has a policy in place that states that you're going to go above and beyond for this type of thing, which would be a development variance permit, you have to, for fairness, you have to treat every DVP the same. So if you start asking for more requirements for this process, it can open us up to litigation. So we have to, for fairness principles, we have to follow the legislative requirements unless council has a policy stating that they will go above and beyond. And when you go above and beyond, you have to go above and beyond for everybody, not just for one application.
Okay, so I understand then that the process will have notification to the surrounding neighborhood, but we do not have a special meeting to address it. It will be addressed at a regular meeting when it comes forward.
Your worship, because the surrounding area residents are going to receive that notification, they have ample opportunity to put their concerns in writing,
Yeah.
which would be considered by council at that regular meeting. So, you know, we don't want to set a precedent that's going to bind not only this council, but other councils by changing the process. So,
Stick to the,
I would just stick to, you know, what's been done in the past and what we would be doing going forward in the future. And just, not disregard, but just, you know, everybody treat this just as it would anybody else.
So this is just for the development variance permit, and that runs with the land. So that is registered with the land, and so that's a land use issue. If council chooses and decides that this is a location that they would consider for this type of use, that would run with the land. But we would still, if council does choose to move in that direction, we would start our process for cannabis retail, which does include a public feedback session for the retail license. So we've split these two processes out just to clarify it, keep it clean, and that was what we were told was the best course of action for this.
Councillor Zelinski.
Yeah, thank you. This one's a little sticky because during the retail cannabis application, we've allowed in our procedures public feedback and an open thing. The problem with this is we're asking for a variance before we get there. The variance is a council decision, even though we collect feedback. But again, there's a possibility of allowing a variance and then still dealing with the application. The problem is if the variance gets defeated, then there's no public input because you don't go to they probably won't go to the application because they don't have the variance. So then there's no public input process. So
Okay, I am totally confused now. Councillor Thompson.
The variance we're dealing with is the setback under the zoning bylaw. That's all we're dealing with.
That's it.
We're not dealing with anything else. And that's what I am going to keep my mind open on, is that this is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with personalities. We're not dealing with licenses. Council's not obliged to vary their zoning bylaw. But we have to give due and fair consideration. And so this is all I'm doing. I'm not going in with any preconceived ideas on what the outcome will be. I'm going to wait until it comes forward and hear the debate.
Councillor Zelinski.
yeah, maybe just to clarify, if, and this is only an if the variance motion fails, will we still be dealing with an application for a pot shop in that location?
No, I would not accept it, because if it doesn't meet the bylaw and council has said no to a development variance permit, then I would be sending my recommendation to the province as a negative recommendation for that license. So, and that's based on our bylaws and our policies, and that's, council made a decision a couple of years ago to allow them, and councils did have the opportunity to say no if they didn't want to allow them in their communities, and council set the regulations for which they would allow them in their zoning bylaws. So this is a standard process that we would go through, and council, with the input of the public in that neighborhood, get to discuss and debate and determine whether or not that is a location that they would like to see that use with that variance.
Thank you. Go.
I was gonna move the motion, Your Worship, is that?
I thought you did already.
Did I? You did, and seconded? Oh, good, all right, I don't have to worry about that, thank you.
And Councillor Zelinski.
Yeah, more of a comment. So if the variance fails, we won't see the application. Again, if it passes, and again, this is just a comment, common sense that if the variance passes, then it's a sort of a de facto approval of the application itself for a pot shop, so.
Thank you, Worship. It was delegated to me in my department to make the recommendations for positive or negative recommendation for these retail licenses. But my recommendation is based on our bylaws. So if it doesn't meet our bylaws, then my recommendation is no. If they choose to come forward and ask for a development variance permit, then that comes before council and the public to make a decision about that land use at that time. So my recommendations are based on whether or not they meet our bylaws or not.
Okay. Are we clear?
Can we beat this up in a...
Ready for the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I was going to comment on the non-medical. You realize that if there is a medical permit that someone holds, that they're not required to meet any of our bylaws at all. I'll give you the workshop if you want, but
No, let's not go there.
let's not go there. But that is why there is still that term medical that's used in the wording. It's a trick question. Leave it alone for now, Councillor Thompson says.
Yes.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. All right. Moving on. Bylaws. So the first bylaw under bylaws A, the council give final reading to the officer position establishment bylaw number 2062, and that council give final reading to the officer position repeal bylaw 1623. So we're combining the new one and repealing the old one. It looks very efficient. Councillor Zelinski.
I'll move that motion.
And seconded by Councillor Moslin. Discussion?
Question.
Yes.
In the old 1623 or what it was, Schedule H was the oath of office. Where is that going to sit now? So in our package, I've got page 124 of 143 is what I'm reading, but since that's going to be stripped out, I'm just wondering where it's going to sit.
They don't have to take an oath of office at that level of... Is there some confusion with that wording?
I don't believe it needs to be part of the bylaw. The oath of office is a standard piece in, I believe it's either a community charter or another document where you have your standard oath.
Right.
It doesn't need to be prescribed in a bylaw on what it is. I believe it was just attached in the other one for convenience purposes. So I know some municipalities do the oath of office and some don't for their officers. It all depends.
Okay, thank you. Did we vote on that?
Not yet. Question?
I'm getting like modeling after 7 hours. All those in favor? Carried. Snow clearing policy. Council adopts the new snow clearing policy 1103 and again repeals the previous 1104 policy. Can I have that motion? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Zelinski. Discussion.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Your Worship, and first off, I want to thank city staff for working so hard in almost impossible conditions. You know, you can scrape the snow off the road today, in the morning, and by afternoon it's still 6 inches of slush. So it has been an ongoing struggle. And I see that there has been changes to the priorities that I urged in an earlier one. I guess the question has come up that throughout the whole policy, I don't see any comment on sand, or sand application. Is it appropriate in this to do that as a policy statement? Sand, basically simply put, sand will be applied whenever necessary, or, sand will be applied when staff feel it is appropriate and worthwhile, or do we not
Wide
just...
open there. I will check that in.
Okay, anyhow, that's my query.
Do we have a
Sand.
response on sand and what role that would play in the wording, if any, Ron?
Your worship, from my experience, snow clearing bylaws really just set overall broad, the actual application of sand ultimately is the ultimate operational matter, because,
Right.
there's implications. I think, council sets the policy as to, will downtown be a priority, will a hillside be a priority, those types of things, but I wouldn't necessarily go right down into the level of how sand would be applied or not applied, because then you are leaving yourself open if it's not applied a certain way on a certain day. So I think what you want are safe streets, and you hope that your staff are working diligently to do that. And really, it's the priority of areas, those types of things that are more in the policy realm rather than the application of sand.
Thank you. Councilors, do we have a motion here on the table?
Question?
Councilor Zelinski?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple suggested changes or questions. And I'll go back to an earlier question. Bottom of the second page, trigger points. And again, I ask, how long is sporadically?
Yeah, I don't know whether we're going to get into that debate today in terms of wording of it, but you want to take a shot at that one, Daniel?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what exact process what exact timeframes the night crew checks the webcams, but I know it's part of the on-calls roads person and process to when there's snowfall predicted to check the webcam at night. So sporadically probably means every, I think at midnight or something, somebody gets up and actually logs onto the website and checks it. Now we've made it available so they can do it from their phone by now. So they don't have to, go onto a computer anymore. But some of the crew lives out of town, so they need to be able to see the picture in town, right? Instead of making a call what's going on at Christina Lake, for example, versus here. So sporadically means simply they have a routine that they use to check in. I hope that.
Good with that?
I guess what I'm going to suggest is the same wording as the sentence before it, just to give us some idea. Triggers will be checked once per day during the regular work week and at least once per day by the webcam after snowfall and weekends.
To replace sporadically?
Yeah, that's my suggestion. I'd like to suggest on the next page, just for clarity and definitions, we've got in the first and second bullet point, outside works. Can we change that to public works building? At least people know where the public works building is. They might not know where the outside works is. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to make some of these changes as clarifications.
So council can still pass a motion saying as amended?
If everyone's okay with those changes.
Yeah, I have no trouble with those. You ready for the question on this? We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Carried. So that's the end of the list. I'd like to draw us back to the regional district for one last comment. I've been watching the regional district and boundary economic development opening their meetings with recognition of native rights. And I would like to adopt that in the coming weeks, taking the language that's being used out there by the regional district and BEDC as my suggestions for how we do it at this table. But I'll bring that forward in a formal motion over the next little while so we can have an opportunity to react to it.
And I will support that.
Thank you.
We do it at our Social Services Advisory Group.
Yes, you do. Yeah, I forgot.
And I've been to functions at the curling rink, and that's also been recognized. So I will support that.
It takes a matter of seconds and it shows respect. Okay. That's it. So we're open to discussions, comments from the gallery this evening. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, Les Johnson, GFTV. I have a question, I have two things. One's a question from somebody who owns a business in the area. I won't say whether they're within 30 or 100, but they're curious. They were looking at the agenda and they saw this about notifying people by mail. And they're saying, if a cannabis shop has impacts on 100 meters of surroundings, why only mail property owners within 30 meters? By doing this, so aren't they admitting 36 meters is good enough? Or is that because it's the DVP and it's not the pot shop? I'm curious.
I didn't quite get the detail of that.
Well-
Is it?
Okay.
Planning was going to answer that.
We use 30 meters because that is our standard for DVP. We have discussed whether or not we need to change that, and then we do modify a bylaw for that. So, but that's our standard. So it's part of the standard process. So that's what we use.
So it's not really whether it's a pot shop or not. It's the, yeah, okay. They were curious about that. It can be confusing. One more thing. So earlier on, let's get my notepad up here. Earlier on, Councillor Moslin had questioned this whole idea of the $12 million in land acquisition and whether there's really $12 million in value in that $12 million being spent. I mean, what's the value? So my question is this, it's just more of a suggestion. Could the $12 million in land acquisition be used as some sort of leverage against the insurance premiums we pay? We have to maintain a fire department up to certain standards. Those are set by the underwriters in order to preserve our status with the insurance underwriters, and that gives all of us property owners a break on our fire insurance. If we let it lapse too far down, then we all pay hundreds of dollars more every year. You can just ask anybody in the fire department. So, seeing as the city is taking the trouble and spending the money to keep damage from flooding minimized as much as possible by lessening the impact of the flooding, by creating a spillover floodplain to take the pressure off of other parts of the town, couldn't we make an argument that because the city is going this extra mile, we should all get a break on flood insurance, or they should offer us flood insurance if they're not doing it? It's just a suggestion. I know that they have in place for the fire departments and for the fire insurance, there is a well-established mechanism and qualifications and everything else. And there's nothing for this, but we're one town, but there's going to be tons more towns that will suffer flooding, and the insurance industry will end up trying to walk away from it, or welch on the deal, or whatever they can to ameliorate their losses. And I'm just saying that if we're going to have to spend $12 million to basically buy a bunch of properties and turn them into floodplain, maybe this is one way we could get some sort of value back, at least for the taxpayers. That's all.
Worth considering. Thank you, Les. And further from the gallery, Nigel James.
Mr. James, who is a resident of Grand Forks and therefore a proud member of the corporation, although he pays, I believe, too much money, but that's another story. I'm surprised to see Mr. Johnson here. I thought that he was taking his bed and walking away. I'm delighted he's still here, but the question is, what have the council done about providing either another person or entity to perhaps do visual presentations of council meetings, or an audio system? It's something I think that you perhaps ought to think about. It might, if you're lucky, bring more people out to council meetings. I wouldn't put money on that one,
Okay, let's answer that question. Daniel, could you refresh us a bit in terms of what we're looking at here at this point and what we've considered? I mean, we find it extremely valuable as part of the local democratic process, and you know, we're hard pressed to find anything to replace it, but Daniel.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've had a report in front of council, I think it was 4 years ago or so, at a time where Mr. Johnson tried to retire the first time. That spoke to various options that council may have. We're currently planning to update this report to see if council's interested in any of the other ideas. Hopefully Mr. Johnson can stay on for a couple more months here. I'm hoping by March we can have a report in front of council, but council would have to possibly make some sort of budget decisions around that, because there may be some implications if there's extra staff that would be needed to manage the system or even purchase the system that we currently don't own.
Hard shoes to fill. And a second question?
Oh, indeed, Your Worship. I'm going to modify down from the 11 that I've got, actually, from this meeting.
Yeah, we kind of like it to
be short and sharp. I believe I've got 5 minutes or something. But anyway, the thought I have is we've seen or heard that the staff are overworked and they have problems of keeping up to standard with their requirements with the deadlines. It's either a matter of organisation or something is wrong, and that needs to be resolved and sorted out. I don't know what it is, but there's something that's wrong here. The official community plan someone said it's the driving force behind the city. I understand that the official community plan is about 15 years out of date.
know it's
When was it last, may I ask when it was last
the last
updated?
full community plan.
2011 was.
2011.
Oh, so it's only 9 years out of date. Well, that might be one of the problems that you've got. The definitions, that was mentioned a long time ago. Might I suggest that the good way of doing it is the way the community charter does it. At the back end you have an annex or an appendix, whichever, Annex A, where all the definitions are listed, and then they apply to everything that goes in the community plan, and you don't have to sort them out on individual.
And we have gone around and shopped definitions. We've got some boilerplate definitions. What's missing, I think, has been the public discussion, as Councillor Zielinski has pointed out. Not that we don't have some basic boilerplate definitions.
Super. Well, the sooner that happens, the easier it will be for the staff. The official community, yeah.
Okay, tighten it up.
No, the last one, which was mentioned about the Aboriginal statement and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
As I understand it, being an East-West Valley, and I don't know much about the Aboriginal whys and wherefores, but they never settled here because it was an East-West Valley, and they never occupied this area.
That is being disputed, actually.
Well, until it's been proved one way or the other. The only thing is, what it was used for here were for many tribal battles, apparently, because it was somehow suitable. Anyway, we need to get to the bottom of it and find out what the definition is and the historical facts before we go jumping in and trying to please all people. It's just the way it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Further, Gloria.
Just a comment, there was a nice show at the gallery on the Senex people. And if it's still up, that would be good to see.
Thank you. Anything, Jensen?
Yeah, I just had a question about the process for the DVP as compared to last time. So am I right to understand that last time we blended both the business license and the DVP?
Cannabis license.
Yes, yes. And so I guess why did we have them together last time and separate this time?
We were doing that process to go as fast as we could with the process, so it was just to expedite the process. And we left it for the applicant to determine or decide whether or not they were happy having those processes combined or whether they want them separate. So just expediency.
So was the applicant's option to have them combined last time?
Yeah, it was just an applicant option, and so we give them the option, and if they're in a hurry and would like to get the process going, the sooner they hear from us, sometimes they make the decision because they have the opportunity to either start the process for the license with the province, or they can come to us, they can go through and go through any hoops that are required to go through here, whether it's for the business license or for a variance, and then apply, because it's really expensive for them to apply for those licenses, the provincial level. So there's two pathways basically into the license process.
Did they have the option the second time around as well, or was it separated on the side of things, deciding to go one and then the other?
This is the second time around for that application.
But it's not for a business license. It's just for the DVP.
Yes, it's for the DVP at this time, yes. So we hold the business license application until the process is complete. And if we get the recommendation is a positive recommendation, it goes to the province, and then the province has the final say on the license. So we withhold the business license until we get the approval from the province that they have been approved to operate.
That's it? Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to adjourn?